You're at the pump, and the price of gas is so high you start wondering if it's made of liquid gold. You fill up your car, but you're pretty sure you just sold a kidney to afford it. Well, buckle up, because that could be your reality thanks to OPEC and the US playing their own game of who controls the oil. Let's break down how this drama unfolds and how it's going to impact your bank account. Today, we're diving into one of the most critical and complex issues in the global economy, the battle for control over oil. For years, the US has been flexing its muscles in the energy game, pushing for energy independence and flooding the market with cheap oil. But now, OPEC, the world's most powerful oil cartel, is fighting back with drastic production cuts that could cripple the US economy and send oil prices soaring. In this video, we're going to break down exactly what OPEC is up to, how the US is reacting, and most importantly, how this entire energy showdown could affect your wallet. If you're ready for a deep dive into one of the most crucial issues impacting our future, let's get started. Chapter 1: OPECs. Strategic play. A power move against the US. As of 2023, the United States was producing approximately 12.9 million barrels of oil per day BP, a sharp rise from around 9.4 million BPD in 2017. This boom, driven by shale oil, helped the US become the world's largest oil producer, surpassing Russia and Saudi Arabia. But in response, OPEC, led by Saudi Arabia, made a calculated move in October 2022, announcing a production cut of 2 million BPD, despite rising global oil demand post-pandemic. The message was clear. OPEC still holds the power when it comes to controlling global oil prices, and they were determined to remind the US and the world of that fact. By cutting production, they increased oil prices, with Brent crude reaching $95 per barrel in October 2022, up from the $40-50 range earlier in 2020 during the COVID-19 pandemic's oil price crash. For most consumers, the immediate impact is at the pump. Higher oil prices lead to more expensive gasoline. By June 2022, the average price of gas in the US reached $5 per gallon in some states. When oil prices rise, it becomes more expensive for businesses to transport goods, leading to increased prices across the board. Everything from groceries to electronics could cost more. Public transportation fares could also increase, and even utility bills, which are often tied to the price of oil, may rise, causing additional strain on household budgets. For those already struggling with inflation, this can make a significant difference in disposable income. Chapter 2: The US Shale Revolution versus OPECs. Oil monopoly. The US shale revolution changed the global energy game. Between 2010 and 2020, US oil production surged by over 130% thanks to technological advancements in hydraulic fracturing, fracking, and horizontal drilling. As of 2023, shale oil accounted for nearly 64% of total US crude oil production. In 2019, the US even became a net exporter of oil for the first time in over 75 years, shipping around 89,000 barrels per day BPD abroad. However, the US's strategy of flooding the market with cheaper oil wasn't without its limits. Despite US production hitting record highs, the country remained reliant on OPEC for certain types of crude oil, particularly heavier grades required by refineries. The US primarily produces light, sweet crude, which is easier to refine into gasoline, but is not suitable for all refineries. For example, as of 2023, around 60% of US crude oil imports came from Canada, while OPEC members such as Saudi Arabia, Iraq, and Venezuela provide the heavier grades. A direct consequence of the US shale revolution has been lower energy prices in the past decade. For households and businesses alike, cheaper oil meant lower utility bills, lower fuel prices, and cheaper transportation costs for goods. However, as OPEC tightens supply and oil prices increase again, consumers may face an increase in everyday living costs. For instance, truck drivers and delivery services crucial to the retail and e-commerce sectors will have to contend with higher fuel prices. The added transportation costs could push up the price of everyday products, especially goods that rely on long-distance transportation, such as food or electronics. Chapter 3: OPECs. Counterattack, production cuts, and price increases. In response to the surge in US shale production, OPEC's decision to implement cuts has dramatically altered the global energy balance. The 2 million BPD cut announced in October 2022 was the largest reduction since the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic. This strategic move sent oil prices soaring, with Brent crude reaching an average of $94 per barrel by the end of 2022, compared to $50 per barrel in early 2021. OPEC's move is also a reminder of the cartel's ability to coordinate production levels. Unlike the US, where private companies act independently, OPEC's member states work together to manipulate the global oil supply. This coordination gives OPEC a unique power to influence oil prices, something the US simply cannot match. This strategic production cut is not just a response to US shale oil, it's a direct effort to reassert OPEC's dominance in the global oil market. The cartel controls approximately 80% of the world's proven oil reserves, and with countries like Saudi Arabia sitting on over 250 billion barrels of oil, they have the financial cushion to weather price wars longer than many US producers. Consumers will feel the consequences of OPEC's production cuts in their daily lives. Increased oil prices mean higher costs for gasoline, natural gas, and other petroleum products, which directly impact household budgets. For families driving to work or taking long trips, filling up at the pump becomes more expensive, and this trickles down to other sectors. As businesses see higher energy costs, they'll likely pass on those expenses to consumers in the form of higher prices for goods and services. In some areas, heating and cooling bills, which are often tied to oil and natural gas prices, could see a sharp rise, particularly in the winter and summer months. Chapter 4. The U.S. Strategy. Flooding the market with oil and its risks. The U.S. could respond by ramping up domestic oil production, aiming to overwhelm OPEC's production cuts. However, this comes with substantial risks. As of 2023, U.S. oil producers are already operating under tight margins, with small to medium shale operators particularly vulnerable. The average break-even cost for U.S. shale oil producers ranges from $70 to $120 per barrel, depending on the region. If prices were to dip below this range, many smaller producers would be forced to shut down or scale back production. Moreover, OPEC's response to a U.S. oil surge could be devastating. If the U.S. floods the market with oil, OPEC could cut production even more, tightening global supply and maintaining high prices. This could trigger a price war, similar to what was seen in 2020, when the price of West Texas Intermediate WTI crude briefly went negative. At that time, prices dropped to $37 per barrel, the first time in history that oil futures turned negative, causing widespread disruption in the U.S. oil industry. A price war in the oil market could have disastrous consequences for both producers and consumers. If U.S. oil companies are forced to cut production due to falling prices, it could result in layoffs, especially among smaller producers in shale regions like Texas and North Dakota. If production falls off, or if companies go bankrupt, job losses will impact local economies, particularly in oil-dependent communities. On the other hand, if OPEC retaliates by cutting production further, fuel prices could spike again, leading to another round of inflation. This means everyday goods could become even more expensive, and families may struggle with transportation costs or heating and cooling bills. Chapter 5. Storage issues and the dangers of an oil glut. Another significant concern is the issue of oil storage. Unlike many other commodities, oil cannot simply be stored indefinitely. Oil storage capacity in the U.S. is finite, and if supply outstrips demand, storage tanks can quickly fill up. The U.S. has approximately 1.1 billion barrels of storage capacity in its Strategic Petroleum Reserve (SPR). But when storage levels reach critical levels, producers are forced to either halt production or sell oil at significant losses. The 2020 oil price collapse is a case in point. Storage facilities were overwhelmed, and oil prices plunged as producers scrambled to offload their excess supply. If the U.S. were to increase production rapidly, without adequate demand or storage options, it could face a similar scenario, resulting in an oil glut and a potential market collapse. When oil prices crash, local economies that depend on the oil industry are severely impacted. Workers in the oil and gas sector may face layoffs or reduced wages, and even consumers will feel the effects of a sudden drop in energy prices, at least in the short term. For consumers, it could mean price volatility for things like fuel, heating bills, and electricity costs, making financial planning more difficult. Looking ahead, the global energy market is entering an era of heightened uncertainty. OPEC's recent actions highlight the cartel's ongoing efforts to maintain control over global oil prices, while the U.S. faces a critical decision about whether to ramp up production or shift towards renewable energy solutions. The global energy landscape is at a crossroads, with major implications for consumers, businesses, and governments alike. For ordinary citizens, higher energy prices could persist for years to come, leading to rising costs across the board. Everything from gasoline to food to electricity could be more expensive. At the same time, Uncertainty in the oil market means volatility in household budgets and a difficult road ahead for energy consumers. As we await OPEC's next move in the US's response, the future of global energy looks increasingly uncertain, and it will be felt deeply in everyday life. The world now stands at a crossroads. The decisions made today by governments, corporations, and global policymakers will determine whether this trade war propels economies towards self-sufficiency or drags them into prolonged volatility. One thing is certain: this trade war is not just a battle between two nations, it is shaping the future of global trade as we know it. So, what do you think? Is this economic confrontation a necessary step toward independence, or is it a dangerous game that could lead to long-term economic hardship? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you want to stay updated on the latest developments in global trade, don't forget to subscribe for more in-depth analysis and discussions on the evolving economic landscape.